You ever stop and wonder how you actually learn stuff?
Hmm.
Like really get new information into your head so you can, recall it later for an exam or figure out a totally new skill for work.
Ah, yeah. What's actually going on up there?
Exactly. What's happening inside your brain when that clicks?
That is precisely what we're diving into today. We've got some great sources here, articles looking at how the brain changes with experience.
Okay.
And the mission really is to unpack what they tell us about this whole learning and remembering process.
And the big idea, tying it all together, it seems, is this thing called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, right?
hmm
It's basically the brain's, well, its ability to change and adapt, not just when you're young, but like all the time based on what you experience.
It's pretty amazing,
It
honestly.
really is.
Because I think a lot of us grew up with that older idea, that your
Yeah.
brain's kind of hardwired once you're an adult.
Right, that it doesn't change much.
But these sources are clear.
Right.
That's just not the case. Your daily life, your activities, they're literally reshaping your brain.
Constantly. And this reshaping, it happens in a couple of main ways, according to the research.
Okay.
First, there's structural neuroplasticity. That's where the actual physical structure of the brain changes.
Like physically.
Yeah, because of your experiences.
Yeah.
So maybe you learn to play the guitar, and the brain areas for like finger dexterity and sound processing might actually change structure a bit.
Wow. Okay. Actual restructuring. What's the other type then?
That's functional neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be even more incredible. It's the brain's ability to reorganize itself.
Reorganize. How so?
Well, say if one area gets damaged, maybe from an accident or something,
Yeah.
other parts of the brain can sometimes sort of take over those lost functions.
No way.
Yeah, to compensate so you can keep functioning. Different brain regions can actually shift their roles, which is pretty remarkable.
Okay, so the brain changes. It adapts. Structurally, functionally, got it. But how does it actually store stuff, like memories or skills? What are the building blocks inside this changing brain?
Right, good question. So, at the most basic level, information, memories,
Mm-hmm.
it's all stored in connected networks of nerve cells, neurons.
Neurons, okay.
Yeah.
The brain's messengers.
Exactly, sending and receiving signals. And the sources talk about these neurons forming groups, sometimes called cell assemblies.
Cell assemblies, okay.
And here's the key part. Neurons aren't just static dots. They grow these tiny branches.
Branches.
Yeah, little extensions. And where a branch from one neuron meets another, they form a connection point. That point is called the synapse.
Ah, synapses. I feel like that's where the magic happens.
That is absolutely where the action is. The synapse is that junction, that tiny gap where one neuron passes its signal to the next one.
Okay.
And these synaptic connections are just critical. They're the physical basis for memory. The information is essentially encoded in the strength and the specific pattern of these connections.
Strength and pattern. Okay, so synapses hold the memories. Now, connect that back to neuroplasticity. How does learning something new actually change these synapses?
Right. So this is where it gets really interesting for learning. Those connections, those synapses, they aren't fixed. They're incredibly changeable or plastic.
Malleable.
Exactly. They can get stronger or they can get weaker. And it all depends on how often and how effectively they get used.
Okay, like the driving example one of the articles used. First time you drive, it feels awkward. You're thinking about every single step.
Precisely. Those neural pathways, the specific synapses involved in steering, braking, checking mirrors, they're new, maybe a bit weak.
Makes sense.
But the more you practice driving, the more you activate those specific groups of neurons and their connections.
And firing them up again and again.
You literally strengthen those synapses. They become more efficient, the signal passes more easily, more quickly, it gets more robust.
Which is why driving eventually becomes second nature. You don't have to consciously think about every little thing.
Exactly. Because the underlying physical connections are strong. They're easily activated. And this leads right into that classic neuroscience idea mentioned in the sources.
Which one?
Cells that fire together, wire together.
Yeah. Fire together, wire together. I love that phrase. It paints such a clear picture.
It really does. It means when neurons are activated at the same time, repeatedly, because they're part of the same thought or action or memory.
Like practicing that guitar chord.
Right. Their connection, the synapse between them, physically gets stronger. They become more tightly linked, more effectively wired together.
And that connects to what Judy Willis, the neurologist, said in one source. Practice makes permanent.
Exactly. It's not just about getting it perfect. It's that the repetition itself makes those neural networks stronger, more efficient, more lasting.
Okay, so practice builds stronger connections. But wait, does the brain just keep adding connections forever? Surely not.
No, definitely not. That would be,
Yeah.
well, chaotic.
Right. Talk about information overload.
Totally. If we just kept every single synapse that ever formed, especially from infancy when we make tons of them, the brain would become incredibly inefficient, slow, noisy.
So what does it do?
It edits, it cleans house. There's this fascinating fact in one of the articles. The average adult brain actually has about half the number of synapses as a young child's brain,
Half. Seriously, that's kind of wild.
isn't it? It seems counterintuitive, but it's crucial.
So where do they go? What happens to them?
They get pruned. There's a process called synaptic pruning.
Synaptic crooning. Okay.
The brain basically gets rid of the synapses that aren't used very often, or the ones that are less efficient. Think of it like tidying up pathways, removing the ones that aren't really going anywhere useful.
So it's like optimizing the network, keeping the strong, useful connections and clearing out the clutter.
Exactly. Pruning helps the brain work more efficiently by focusing its resources on the connections that you actually use regularly.
Okay, let's pull this together. We build and strengthen connections through use fire together, wire together, and then the brain prunes away the weaker, less used ones to stay efficient. So, what's the bottom line for us, when we're trying to learn something new or remember information?
Well, the bottom line is this really powerful feedback loop. The more you engage with something, a piece of knowledge, a skill, the more you activate those specific neural circuits.
Right, like practicing scales or reviewing notes.
Yes, and that activation strengthens the synapses within those circuits. This makes it easier, faster, more reliable to access that information or perform that skill the next time.
Which is why regular practice works. It's literally reinforcing the brain pathways.
Precisely. It's the biological reason why review and consistent effort pay off.
And the flip side, what if you learn something, those connections form, but then you just don't use it? You don't revisit that language or practice that skill.
But then those particular synapses don't get activated much. They stay relatively weak compared to the pathways you're using all the time.
Okay.
And if they stay weak and unused for long enough, the brain's pruning process might just identify them as, well, unnecessary.